Welcome to She's Homemade with myself, Brooke, and Andrea.
Yeah, today we are going to talk about women being taken seriously in the sales business and that frame of sales industry and how, you know, there's a lot of factors that are involved in women's businesses, and being young, not being in the business a long time are definitely factors that affect women more than men.
Yeah.
I think, in my experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to kind of dive into it and talk about some of our own stories and how being a woman has created some challenges in our business.
Yeah. So I think just starting off, I'll just start by asking a question.
Yeah, sure.
So have you ever been in a situation where you weren't taken seriously in your business?
Yes.
Or I guess if you were like chosen, like if a man was chosen in a job over you or anything like that?
Yeah, I think especially in real estate, it's definitely something that is a factor in starting out in real estate. I was younger when I started out in real estate, and I know actually the team that I started out on had even younger women than me when they started, and it definitely was something that we had to overcome a little bit, was our age. We made sure that we knew our stats. We made sure that it's almost like we had to like overcompensate.
For sure.
Because I feel like we weren't taken seriously right out of the gate, whereas a man and someone on the team that had started at the same time as me put on a suit, and the next day he was taken seriously. So I'm not saying that's always the case, and I'm not saying that all people look at women or young women like that, but in my experience, I definitely have seen that there's this, you know, apprehension to hire young women or hire women that haven't been in the industry for a long time. So
yeah,
for me, that's kind of where I feel like longevity in the industry is far more important for women than men. And it just, you kind of feel like you have to prove yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
More.
I feel like women hide their age a lot too over men,
true.
Right? And I think that's the reason too. Or even like women hide, like I know people in our industry that like, you know, they just start and they don't mention that they're like, oh, I'm new, or
yes,
oh, I'm young. Like, you know, you kind of have to like avoid the topic and dodge it a bit, which is kind of silly because everyone starts from somewhere.
Yeah, I was actually told to not lie, but I was told to kind of stretch. I actually started as an admin in real estate, and so
you were saying like
in real estate.
Yeah,
I was saying I'm in real estate for 3 years, but really I've had my license for 1.
Yeah.
So, but it mattered because I had to make sure that people were taking me seriously, and I overcompensated. I like studied all the stats. I made sure that I knew my market better than anyone because people were going to ask questions of me, and they were going to make sure that I knew the answers so that they felt like I was qualified.
Yeah. And I feel too, like just touching on that too, I feel like men sometimes have like an issue working with women, whereas like, I feel like women never really have an issue working with men, right?
Yeah.
And I mean,
exactly.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that's always the case, but I mean, usually it is, right? Some men are like prefer, especially in like finance too. Like I find, even I'll get a referral from somebody and they're like, I just feel more comfortable like going to like the banker or the man, like, the man that I've been working with at the bank, even though like you were referred to me or whatever. And, you know, and I think people like, it's mostly, you know, just different generations too. I think like now, like the upcoming generation, and my generation specifically, like is a little bit more open, but it's tough.
Yeah. I definitely have seen that. And it's the older men that I feel like I have to prove myself to. Whereas, you know, if a man walked into the door and sat down for a meeting, maybe they are instantly respected in our industry or real estate and finance. And so for me, when I walk into those meetings, I have all of my notes prepared. I have all of my numbers prepared. I'm pretty confident in what I'm going to say. And even still,
we have to give off like a confident vibe too, though.
Yeah,
I feel that like
you still feel insecure going into that position because you never know how you're going to be received.
Totally.
when you're younger than that person.
Yeah. And I feel like age definitely comes into it. And I think like when I started very young. Like I was 23 when when I got my mortgage license. And I mean, lack of experience too, like mind you, like I definitely, like again, everyone starts somewhere and I'm so grateful for the people that like, took a chance on me at that time. But I do feel like age just played, like I hid my age for forever, even with like friends and stuff that I meet sometimes. Like literally, I just would avoid it. Now I don't.
Yeah.
But I used to avoid it because I used to just be like, people won't take me as seriously as like a young woman that's starting a business.
Yeah, I agree. And again, like this is just a specific viewpoint because I know that there's very successful women, especially in real estate, who I know personally, who are killing it, doing great.
Yeah.
People actively seek out to work with them.
Yeah.
But it's because they've been in the industry for so long.
Yeah.
And they have proven themselves with numbers and number of transactions and successful transactions. So now
you almost have to have like a track record.
Yeah, you do. And so it's definitely like the longevity of being in this industry matters.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it matters to men and women equally, but specifically women, I think you are taken more seriously when you've been in it longer.
For sure. Yeah. Well, and it's hard too, I think, like, and I'll segue a little bit into this too. Like, you're a mom of two. And so am I. Like, do you think starting a business with kids is difficult? Like, how do people perceive that? I know, like, on my end, like, I started my business and had kids at the same time. So I never really stopped. But I feel like now I almost have to like keep up that image, you know what I mean? Or that, because I'm like, I didn't really take a mat leave. I didn't take time off. So now anytime I want to, like, I almost feel like I can't because I didn't when I had the time to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think men or people in general tend to look at mothers or people who either have just had kids or have young kids don't have the time to focus on them as clients or focus on the business,
or they think you're like, your mentality is like elsewhere.
Exactly.
Or like, oh, they won't be able to give me the same attention as somebody who didn't have kids, sort of. You know?
Exactly. Actually, when I was pregnant with my last, I was actively working with a buyer client, and I didn't even want to tell him that I had given birth because I was so scared that he was going to say, oh, I won't use you anymore. I'll go with someone else. So we were actively showing houses. I gave birth. I can't remember. It was like on a Friday or a Saturday. And then on the Sunday, he said, can I go see this house? And I said, I'm so sorry. I can't. Like, I just had my baby. And I said, I'll set you up with a colleague. They'll show you the house and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
And after that showing with a colleague, I never heard from him again. And he bought a house with someone else a week later. And I just got ghosted. So it's like, I'm sure that wasn't his intention.
Yeah.
But either he didn't want to bother me or he didn't want to make it a thing. But for me, like, that sucked.
Yeah.
Like, I had been working with you for a month.
Yeah.
And
all the time that you put into it was now just like basically wasted.
Exactly. And like, I would have made it work and I could have still done the paperwork. I couldn't do the showing, but like,
Which
still
is
would
so
have been
ridiculous though. Like, I know so many people and so many moms that like who own businesses, and even myself, like I've had, 3 kids, and there's times where like my kids are sick, or like, I just give birth and then I'll like send an email the next day and they'll be like, and like clients, like some people are like, oh my God, take some time off.
Doing?
But I'm like, I also feel like we can't because of stuff like that. Like I'm scared of that too. Yeah. And I just feel like, there's just a tough space in there, and a fine line where people just like don't understand it. And that's including like, not necessarily just men. I think people in general just don't really get it. Anybody that doesn't have kids doesn't get it, right? Yeah.
And I don't think that there's anything wrong with, wanting someone's full attention as a client. But I bring it back to like, women and mothers especially are multitaskers, and we can do it well for a reason. And I think that,
but we're all human too.
Yeah.
I'm like, if like I was working with like a male agent and then he came up to me and was like, I'm so sick, I'm so sorry, I wouldn't be like, oh, you are not allowed to get sick. You know what I mean?
I know.
It's like, it's so ridiculous that like us giving birth is like a detriment when like we do, and then like, you know, for example, like even people who have C-sections, they
yeah.
go right home, they walk around with their kids, they change diapers, they work, they're on their computer.
Yep.
And I'm like, the amount of like work that we put in when we're like supposed to be recovering.
Yeah.
And then like literally like we're all human. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
so crazy that that's such a thing.
Yeah, I've lost out on specific clients because I was recovering with my C-section. So like it definitely hits, it hurts, like it
Yeah.
does suck. I don't think in their mind they were thinking I'm not using her for this. I think it was I won't bother her.
Yeah.
But for us, like that's a disfair advantage.
I totally agree. And I think too, like people don't understand that like we don't have maternity leaves. We don't have like the luxury of that.
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
for us,
we're
I'm like,
working.
I have to continue. Like we have
Yeah.
to, and like stuff like that. That's a big, yeah, it does suck because at the end of the day, it's not like, oh, I'm still collecting a paycheck. It's okay.
Yeah.
I lost a client. It's like, no, that's my paycheck gone too. Right.
I
and that's a
know.
client for life, possibly for life that you lost too. And it's just like,
Yep.
that's what sucks.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, like, there are men out there who will take the paternity leave or who will stay home with the kids when they're young. But a lot of the time it is the woman. And so I do feel that it does affect business
Yeah.
far more than it does men.
Yeah, and I think too, like, and now I'm just going to revert back because I remember that we looked at this stat about
Oh, yeah.
how labor participation rates for Ontario mothers reached 81%, the highest on record since
Yeah, that's so
1976. Yeah, which I find crazy just because, like, again, it should be more normalized that, like, we're working and we're starting businesses and stuff too because, I mean, I understand in, like, the 1950s, like, you know, how things were so different and everyone's
Right.
mindset was different. But at this point, like, most women, like 81% of women and mothers are like in the workforce.
And that's of this year, correct? I
Yeah.
think that's of this
Yeah.
year. And we were just talking about it, like, is it COVID? Like,
Yeah.
are people divorcing so women have to work more?
to work more, yeah.
Or is it drive? Like, are women getting more into the business sector?
Yeah.
Are they finding other opportunities to make money and do things for themselves? Is it a want or a need? I'm not sure.
Yeah. And I think the cost of living's gone up, obviously,
Right.
in Ontario specifically. But I also think like women are just realizing now that like we can participate and put in just as much as our spouses.
Exactly.
Right?
And I think maybe up until this point, it wasn't as welcomed and women weren't as celebrated to be working and doing the mom life. But
Yeah.
now I think when you see a working mom, you think, oh, wow, she does a lot or
Yeah.
she can do a lot. Like, I don't
That's
think
what
it's,
you hope.
well, yeah, I don't think it's looked down on. I don't think it was looked down on 10 years ago, but I also think that it was looked at as you were choosing work over children. Whereas
Yeah.
now I think we're seeing more of a balance and more of a we can do it all type mentality,
Totally.
which is what we're advocating for.
Yeah, exactly. So this is sort of a question, I guess, that I'll like talk about, or not a question, but I'll just talk about it. So do you envy other people who get like maternity leaves, or how do you feel about just like, because of us specifically, we're not just like a working mom, we're like a business owner, right? So it's a little bit different. And I
Yeah.
think like working moms, I envy them and I don't on like two separate,
I
but
think
I'll let
there's
you
give
answer.
and take. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's positive and negatives to both sides. Like, I used to work the 9 to 5 job.
Yeah.
I worked in an office and, I didn't mind, 5 o'clock hits and you're off the clock and you're done. And I'm going home and not worrying about anything until the next morning at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
But the flip side to our business now is that I don't have to clock in at a specific time. I work when I want, but I also work when I don't want.
Yeah.
I work at 7 o'clock at night sometimes.
Yeah.
And I work when my kids are supposed to be eating dinner. So it's positives and negatives for both. The mat leave sucks. Like we don't get a paid mat leave.
Yeah.
But I also enjoy my job. So I don't necessarily need a year off.
Yeah.
And, I'll hopefully get some of that time back with my kids when they're young because I can pick and choose when I work too.
That's a good way of looking at it. I like that.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
that's the other thing I've learned through the years. I used to, when I first started out in real estate, I was like, any business that came at me, I was like, oh my God, I have to take this. I have to deal with this right now.
Yeah.
I have to do whatever they
I
want
think
whenever they
that's, like,
want it.
That's like everybody that starts out though.
Yeah.
Because I was like that too.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I have to do everything.
Yes,
And
on
I can't
their
say
time.
no.
I can't say no. I've learned that no, actually, like I'm in control of my time.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy to work around other people's schedules, but they have to be willing to work around mine too.
Yeah.
And I've definitely kind of taken control of my schedule in that sense where I used to be like, oh my God, these people want to see a house at 7 p.m. and my kid has soccer and I have to do this and I don't know what to do. And now I'll say, you know what? I'm unavailable at that time.
Yeah.
If you want to see
take the power back too, I think
Yeah.
in some like, and that's what I like, somebody said that to me once and I was like, that's so true, because
Yeah.
ultimately if you're just like giving everybody your free time out when it's like, and you're sacrificed all the time, like you're
Yeah.
sacrificing your family time, your own self-care time, whatever,
Yeah.
to cater to like everybody else, you have to take that power back
Yeah.
sometimes.
And that's not to say that I don't cater to my clients. I definitely take
for
on
sure.
those showings.
Yeah.
But if it becomes something that's too overwhelming, or I can't find a sitter on time, or something happens where I can't make it, I don't stress about it anymore.
Yeah.
Like if they're
and
if they
your
are
job is like crazy. Like the amount I'm like, I always say this. I'm like, I would never ever want somebody to like call me and then I have to leave the house in like 5 minutes. Like
Yeah,
that
that
to me is
happens.
stressful.
Yeah, it does happen. And the way that I balance it is like, if I do get a call at 6 o'clock being like, I want to go see a house at 7, well then, okay, I'll go do that at nighttime. If it's physically, if I'm able to.
If you're able, yeah.
And I've got someone to watch my kids, but then you know what? Maybe I'll do like an hour later start the next morning and I'll either focus on my kids or I'll do a laundry that I missed that night or
Yeah.
whatever. Like, I'm always making sure that I'm swapping things so that I'm balancing my work and mom life.
Yeah. Well, that's important too.
Yeah.
I just think too, like, I don't know. Well, I find it hard to balance. That's one
yeah,
thing.
it is.
But I also find like, even other moms, like they just don't understand. They don't understand being self-employed sometimes. So
Yeah.
with like the maternity leave, I find it difficult because I get really irritated and I have to be like careful with it, but I have to be really, or I get really irritated when people are like, oh, it must be so nice for you that you get to like sit on your computer on your couch.
Right.
And be like, that's what your job is. You just get to sit at home on your computer. And I'm like, there is so much more to that than, you know what I mean? I think people just don't like understand that, like, and sometimes too, being self-employed, people are like, oh, whatever, it's just like a side gig. I'm like, no, I have like a career that I can
Yes.
work from home, which is great. But I'm like, it takes away time, like time away from my kids. I
Yeah.
don't get a mat leave, like,
Right.
you know, and when people like, I just think sometimes I'm like, I take the time to really understand other people's jobs and stuff. And I feel like sometimes people just don't do the same, especially with people who
Yeah.
are self-employed. And I don't take it for granted. Like I'm super happy that I get to do that because
Right.
I look at like nurses and I'm like, I literally would never.
Yeah. Their shift work is crazy. I couldn't.
No, I couldn't either. And even like the 9 to 5, I left a 9 to 5 job because
Yeah.
I just really didn't like it.
Yeah.
So it's not like I would, you know, take their place for it, but I do, it sucks sometimes. Like we have stuff in our job that, you know, it's not just all like cupcakes and rainbows, like you get to work from your couch or
Yeah.
like, oh, you get to go on vacation or, oh, and I'm like, yeah, I work on vacation.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I had a vacation at the start of this year in February. I went away for 5 days. I worked 4 out of the 5 days. My husband was irritated
mad.
with me. Like, I'm sorry. Like, but it's true. Like we went to go get away and I ended up having to work 4 of the days. And it did, at the time it sucked, but I was like, you know what, man, like this is my paycheck.
Yeah.
So I got to take it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So yeah, it's definitely, you know, you got to look at both sides and you got to figure out what's important to you. And if you love your job or if it's something that you are good at or that you want to make it a career, I think you make those sacrifices for it.
yeah, totally.
And when I was in the 9 to 5 grind, I didn't like what I did and I was
Yeah.
bored and I was like, is this it? Like, is this my life? I'm going to go to an office for the rest of my life and just
Yeah.
work on someone else's work. And so as soon as I got out of that and I expanded into sales specifically is where I feel like you learn that there's so much more to a career
Yeah.
and you can love what you do.
Yeah, totally.
And so then you're okay with having to work on the weekends and you're okay to have, you know, to switch your time out for your kids, but make sure you're making it up in other
Yeah. And I think I'll just move on to that too. I think it's really important to find things that you enjoy.
Yeah.
Because I think like what you just said, you're okay to make sacrifices because you actually enjoy your job. And I think so many people are stuck in their jobs and they don't love it. And it's like, well, you do have other options. Like, and even though, it's not in the cards for everybody to like drop everything, quit their job and start a new business. And I get that. But that's why there are like, if you are passionate about something, like start it on the side maybe. And like, I don't know.
Like our passion.
Yeah, I know. Like this. Yeah.
Like this. Yeah. Like we enjoy doing it, so it doesn't feel like work to us.
Yeah.
And so I was just told, I was talking about, I'm starting a new venture.
Yeah.
I was talking to my girlfriend the other day and I was explaining what we're doing. And she's like, oh my God, you do so much, you juggle it all. And I'm like, I don't look at it like that. I look at it as like, this part of the job is so fun.
Yeah.
And it's something that I love doing. And yeah, I actually now work more because I've added a side gig to my job.
Yeah.
But when I'm at home on my computer working on this, it's fun.
Yeah.
So I don't look at it as work. But I think that it's really important to love what you do.
Totally. So I think that's all we have for today.
Yes.
I'll segue that.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. And please let us know if you have any questions or if you have your own experiences about, being taken seriously as a woman. Or, hey, chime in if you want to do the flip side as a man. Feel free.
Yeah.
And
follow us on Instagram. And thank you for listening.